I'm a local, is where I was born and raised, yes. Well, I'm a local, where I spend my dying days, yeah.
I'm very grateful to Larry for putting on this workshop today and sharing his knowledge. I'll let him introduce our other panelists, and I'll just add that at the end of our discussion today, I'll come back up here and briefly introduce our Artist Services programming, which is available for applications coming up soon, and that's our grant and award programs as well as our creative capacity program. So I'll speak a little bit more about that at the end. And here's Larry.
Thank you. Hey, thanks for coming out. Let me just kind of explain what we're doing. It's loosey-goosey. It's informal. Part of this is going to be made up as we go, although we do have an idea. We've got an outline. But the point is, nobody's holding themselves out as experts today, as much as we are trying to engage everybody in a conversation, have some give and take. And if time allows, we'd like to start out with the format. If you've got a question or if you've got something to say, shout it out. Hold up your hand or just shout it out. If we run short on time, we'll announce that and try to move it all to a Q&A at the end. But the point is, when this is over, nobody's running away. We're going to hang out, and part of this, the excitement of being able to do something like this is ultimately belly up to the bar, have a pint, and do that little networking and meet some people and talk about some projects and some ideas, okay? So thank you, first of all, to Black Cloister for having us, for the Arts Commission, and Jordan for making this happen, and Jake for promising to come in here and help us with the sound. And I'm going to start out with giving some things a little bit of context. Then we're going to have a roundtable discussion here with Joel and Dean. I'll introduce them a little more detailed here in the future. But part of the reason, maybe the main reason we're doing this is, let's face it, man, it's confusing. And it's a fluid environment. Things are changing all the time. And it's not just the music industry, right? There are other examples of digital disruption the most prominent ones are, let's face it, the Lyft and Uber, their impact on people that are invested in or employed by a taxi company or other transportation. We know that Airbnb, tell me that it hasn't had an impact on the hotel industry. Netflix, Hulu, and all that. Certainly, it's having an impact on the first-run theater business. So it isn't just, it's not just music. So this is happening all around us. And I think one of the things it makes it so weird is trying to figure out what exactly streaming is. And we're going to talk a little more specifically about Spotify, just because it seems to be the biggest elephant in the room, but not at the exclusion of anything else. Right? I just think that it's probably the best example and the one we're all most familiar with. And so remember, there's other platforms and these things we're going to discuss will apply to that as well. But what is it? It's not exactly radio, It hasn't totally displaced radio, but it's certainly had an impact. You do earn a public performance royalty, similar to being on the radio. But it's not, maybe DJs or maybe the curators of the playlists are going to be kind of like the next DJs. I don't know. What is it? It's not really supposed to displace record labels. Right? But what it's done is made you as a consumer often think about physical product as being somewhat irrelevant. Right? And we're going to talk about some changes and things on the horizon where maybe some of these streaming platforms are starting to take steps towards more of a record label-like presence. But so where does it fit? And I think the real answer is to keep in mind that it's a distribution platform. And that's really what it's all about. And the closest example is, I think, Netflix, right? Netflix is it's a distribution platform. You tap into it. All these movies from all these different providers are available to you when you want it, on demand, right? Not a schedule. And look how Netflix has pivoted and with now the creation of its own original content. So now they got it coming and going. They not only own the method of distribution, right, and the age-old wisdom is distribution is king. They not only have the handle on distribution, but now they got their own original content, and they're guaranteed a distribution pipeline. And I think we're going to talk about some things where, again, streaming services are starting to go that way. So first, I got to get this out of the way. There, it's done. The next one. And we do this because I can. What's the use of, if you got a music event, you should start out with this famous Hunter Thompson quote. The music business is a cruel and shallow money trench, a long plastic hallway where thieves and pimps run free and good men die like dogs. There's also a negative side. All right, so that's part of why we're here. Let's own up to it. Next, the point about this is, it's not so much about that K-pop band, but the global revenue is reported in 2019, but reported for the 2018 figures is $19 billion. Somebody's making money, all right? When you talk about streaming and what little it pays or people feel taken advantage of or left out, I don't know. But this is one aspect of it. You got to realize, we got to take into account, somebody's making money, right? There's money going around. And out of that $19 billion, streaming accounted for 47% of that. So almost half of all the revenue generated around the globe last year was due to streaming. Physical product sales dropped another 10%. Downloads dropped even faster. They continue to drop, down another 21%. Projecting ahead, some people with their crystal balls estimate the global music market in 2026, if we look ahead, at not $19 billion, but $45 billion by 2026. Most of that due to emerging markets. Spotify just went online in India, things like that, right? Remember, this is a global surge. It's not just the United States. And we're going to, again, this is just some context. We'll put some things in context. And some of you, you're real familiar with this. Some of you aren't. But how do you even get your music onto a streaming service? For do-it-yourself acts, there's things like TuneCore, CD Baby, and DistroKid that's available to everyone. For some sort of relatively small fee, but that's how you'd work through a company like that. If you're an established act with a touring base and got a little more presence, at least on a regional, not a national level, you might work with a more established distribution company like Sony Red or AWOL or 1RPM. And those are just, there are countless other examples. Record labels, they have their own arms, or there's a well-known distribution arm or outfit called The Orchard that only deals with record labels. And, I've had a couple interesting cats that I know that both gave me the same answer. I saw one of them, it got on the one of the big viral 100, whatever, on Spotify, and I had an opportunity to ask him, I said, how'd you do that? He says, my distributor, right? My distributors, guy made that happen. And my friends, you guys don't know these guys, but my buddies in Burgess, Chicago, when the first time I saw that they had received airplay on Sirius XM, and it's, how'd that happen? And their answer was the same, man, my distributor, okay? So if you can get up into this tier, the whole idea is they're able to knock on more and better doors, and they have those relationships. And the whole new thing is happening, just one example of things we'll talk about, that Spotify has been running a test allowing some artists to upload directly to Spotify and to bypass the whole distribution process. So what does it pay? I started out trying to figure this out a couple years ago, and everybody knows it doesn't pay much, but it's like, that's not an answer, and you had to dig a little deeper, and these are some things that I come up with. And again, it's kind of this fluid environment, right, that changes. But Zoe Keating, I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she's this kind of avant-garde celloist, celloist and vocalist and modern music composer. And in Digital Music News, read this example of her out of a little over 2 million, well, 252,000 is less. So 2,252,293 streams on Spotify. She earned $12,000. And for her, that works out to, now, math was never my strong point, but I think that's about half a cent, right? That's what it works out for her. And good, bad, or indifferent, that's the landscape. That's how it's paying. So it's all the more important to have some things like this to exchange ideas.
Throughout 2018, that figure for the whole year?
Right, that was her whole year off of one platform only. That doesn't take into account, I don't know if she's on Tidal or any other platform. That was Spotify only. And part of the reason we're here, remember, we'll share some stories, but I had somebody in my office recently that was making $1,500 a month off of Spotify only. Okay, so it can happen, all right? But some comparisons. Now, and again, you see conflicting information. It's a fluid environment. So I cannot justify or explain the difference between this rate and the slightly higher rate that Zoe Keating talked about. But Napster's at the top, pays closer to 2 cents per stream. Next comes Tidal, followed by Apple, Google, and Deezer, all right? But the reality is Spotify's got the market share. And so, again, that's where our focus is going to be for something like today. And I think as most of us know, or if you don't, that YouTube is absolutely, by far and away, the worst paying thing. So, again, you dig into this, you'll find conflicting information, and that's just one example. And, but so why? Why do you do it? Why? If that's all it's paying, well, Spotify is an interesting thing. What's the future going to bring? The last quarter, fourth quarter of 2018, had its first operating profit. 96 million paid subscribers. Those are paid. 116 million on the ad-supported tier. That equals 207 million users a month spread across 78 countries. That depends what you're trying to do. But if you're trying to get your product out there or hope to have some kind of national or even international presence, you gonna ignore that? I don't think you can. Other people may decide they want to, but that's the reality. Those are big, big numbers at this point. And so now here's how it works. So we know kind of now what the rates are. How are those rates calculated? And there's a couple years ago, Billboard ran this great pie chart. And there's a couple of them, and it still holds pretty true. And this is for every dollar that the streaming service pays out. Where's it go? And one here is Apple, one Spotify. They're pretty much the same. So we're just going to look at the Spotify example. So for every dollar they pay out, 58, the largest breakdown, right? But 58.5 cents goes to the owners of the sound recording. And I think most of you guys would know this distinction, but if not, it's worth repeating. The most basic thing to understand about all this is that there's 2 copyrights in what we're talking about. And right there's one of our teachers. I know she teaches her kids out at Owens Community College about this. But there's a copyright in the composition, and there's a copyright in the sound recording. And this 58.5 cents goes to the owner of the sound recording. Often that's a record company, but you may be in a situation where you own all your own stuff, so that's you. The amount that stays with Spotify is only about 29 cents. Down here, this is one copyright. The other copyright, they pay out approximately 12 to 13 cents for publishing. And that is split between the performance royalties, that's your PRO organization, like BMI, ASCAP, or CSAC, all right? And the other goes to mechanical royalties. This goes to the owner of the copyright of the song. Actually, both of these probably would, but maybe split somehow. And so, 60 cents gets paid out in a sound recording. 12 to 13 cents is going to go to who owns the composition. Yeah.
So for a website like DistroKid, they say that all the profits go to the artists and everything like that. Is that still true that Spotify gets some of that profit back?
I'm not sure I follow or quite understand the question in terms of DistroKid. And DistroKid, I think here's how DistroKid works. And because I've placed a client on there, and I think this may be the distinction. I mean, DistroKid makes money from you. Spotify's making money, DistroKid's making money. But DistroKid makes their money because you sign up and there's a fee. There's a one-time fee, or I think there's a per-year package, right? And you sign up, and no matter how many singles or anything, how much product you upload during this year, it's only one fee. So theoretically then, after you pay your initial fee, 100 cents on the dollar that comes through DistroKid goes to you. So they take a cut, but they do it up front. Other streaming services, I think TuneCore is different. Some may price it that they keep a little bit of every micro penny of everything that flows through. But I think that's the distinction. Okay. Next.
Larry, can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
What is the gauge and measure for that last? Is that like per stream, or how is that dollar?
This is one of the gray areas. I'll tell you. This is for every dollar that Spotify pays out. And so you got to kind of wrap your head around that. And of course, it's only each stream only adds up half a penny. So
It's almost like they get them as a percentage.
200 streams would equal that?
yeah, I guess just do the math. Yeah, something like that. So yeah, this is how this is based on for every dollar they pay out. Yeah. Yeah.
Does any of the formula change if a tune is public domain?
No. Public domain would be the same as being your own intellectual.
I think it should come to you because it would be paid. I think it would be paid, but should be paid to the artist because it'd be treated the same as an original composition. I believe. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, well, remember that. How would that dynamic change if you got a public domain song, right? Yeah. And we got a couple. Look, we got a Delta blues man here and a trad jazz guy. So this is important to them. That's what that's my initial thought. To work it through that you would still be paid, but it should go to you. But the sticky part is anytime you're dealing with a public domain song, is knowing that someone can claim a copyright in a specific arrangement of a public domain song. So the tune itself may be considered public domain, but when you cop somebody else's arrangement of that may or may not be. So a unique arrangement of a public domain song is capable of copyright protection. So that's the best.
But you'll only find that out if your version is successful and then you're worthy of being sued, right?
Right on, yeah. You learned exactly. Yeah, that's right. Next. Thank you. And so what happens? So what does that stuff mean? We'll try to move it along here. So now to take that model, it all depends what kind of contract you've got, if any at all. If someone's under recording contract, let's just say we've all seen the examples. Somebody fill in the blank of any classic rocker you can think of. And I had 1 million streams on Spotify, and all I earned was X number of dollars. Well, it raises more questions than it does answers, to me anyways. I want to know, what's their deal? Did they have a label deal? What's their royalty rate on their label deal? Do they own the publishing? How many songwriters were involved? There's a lot of things that go into that and can really impact that. And there's been some major litigation. It happened first, I think, with Tom Petty and digital downloads when 99-cent download, and he had a deal that paid him whatever, like 18% royalty rate, but on a license, if we license the song, it's 50%. We're going to split it. And the classic example would be to put that in a movie or a commercial or something, right? That'd be a classic example. But when downloads happened, when they were brand new, that was uncharted territory. And he was given, out of 99 cents, he was given an 18% royalty. And he said, bullshit. You didn't manufacture anything. You know, the reason you figured this royalty rate so low, you have expenses, you have marketing. You didn't do anything. You uploaded a file. This should be more like akin to licensing, and I want my 50%. So what they've done since that time is every record contract that I've ever seen that has a separate royalty rate defines that in the definitions, right? That a permanent digital download will be treated just like a unit sale. So that's how they handled that. But there for a while, it was nobody figured out that they had to address that. That's exactly what's happening now with streaming. I saw an article recently about Julio Iglesias. Didn't mean much to me, but when I read the numbers, God, that guy is he's $1 billion industry, man. This is big money. And he had a recording contract. And here's an example of what was happening to him. And this assumes a 16% royalty rate. And just, you know, the landscape is a co-publishing agreement where it gets paid 75% of the statutory mechanical rate, and there's a 50-50 split on the publisher's share of the performance fee. That'd be like the BMI and ASCAP. Pretty typical setup. So for every dollar, 58 cents approximately goes to the sound recording owner, right? And then you have your approximately 12 to 13 cents that's paid out on the publishing side. And if you treat this, if a stream is treated as a unit sale subject to a 16% royalty rate, out of that dollar, 18.1 cents goes to the artist, right? And so a lot of the old classic rock guys are probably under that kind of long-term deal. And yeah, no wonder David Crosby has his, pants in a wad, all right? Next. Now, take this example. I think there's a real trend, especially we're seeing things are changing and labels offering new services, and especially with smaller independent labels, there's a trend towards just a net profit split. We're going to split between you and I. If I'm the label and you're the artist, we're going to split the net profits 50-50. We're not going to worry. There's all these different rates, and we're not going to worry. We're just all going to try to make money. We'll put it all into the same pot, and then we'll split it up equally. And it's a much more equitable approach, in my opinion. So what happens, look at that. And this assumes a 50-50 deal, and this assumes that the DIY artist continues to own their own publishing. But they got to pay, they only get 90% of that because they got to pay a fee to somebody to administer their publishing. Look, it jumps up to 39.99 cents, almost up to 40 cents out of every dollar that the artist gets to retain under that model, okay? All right, what if you own everything, a total DIY project, right? You own it all. You did this, you own the record, you own the publishing. Out of every dollar Spotify pays out, you can keep up to 65 cents. That's quite a difference over that first royalty rate that we saw. But, the caveat is you be doing that probably without any marketing support or any other muscle of whatever a label might bring to the table. But it's an interesting dichotomy. So this is how some people are able to do it and make some money. So, all right, we talked a little bit about how that publishing, for the mechanical royalties, how that's sectioned off. And it's really confusing. This is a chart from the Harry Fox Agency website. And it's like, man, it's the greater of this or that, minus this. But and it gets really confusing. But the way it usually works out is 10.5% of their gross revenue, or net revenue. 10.5% of their net revenue is a figure that gets allotted to the publishing side of the equation. So you don't really know unless you know exactly what kind of money Spotify made last year and exactly how many customers and how many streams it has. But there's a formula for that. So 10.5% is what gets siphoned off. Then out of that, a chunk gets taken away for the BMI, ASCAP, and CSAC money, with the rest going to payment of the mechanical royalties, similar when we're dealing with just physical product, the same land and domain that was pretty much owned by the Harry Fox agency, all right? Good news, kinda, maybe sort of. That rate, that 10.5% rate, is supposed to increase by 50% over the next 5 years. Step up like this to closer to 15%. But number one, everybody except Apple appealed that decision. So that is currently working its way through the courts. And each company's got a different explanation. I don't know why or what their complaints are. But the point is that we'll have to see whether that 50% increase over the next 5 years happens. But that's a scheduled increase for the publishing side. Music Modernization Act, you might have heard about. A recent piece of legislation that actually President Trump presided over the final signing into law. It's supposed to create a centralized mechanical licensing collective to simplify this process, make it easier for rights holders on both sides, for you to register your work somewhere, and if I'm a streaming service and I want to release this song and I want to try to figure out who I'm supposed to be paying, I've got a place to go. And if they have the information, they don't have the information, or they have the information wrong, it's a safe harbor. You can't sue me because I've played by the rules. But right now, if you've been following it at all, this is my analogy is this is Brexit. They've said this is what we want to do, and they don't know how the hell to do it. And they're arguing over it, and there's different people have competing proposals to run the mechanical licensing collective. And this, again, we talked about the confusion. This article that I picked up from Rolling Stone not too long ago is a perfect example. All right, we talked about how you generally get on Spotify. The last year, Spotify has been working some direct licensing deals with artists. Again, you don't have to go through a distribution service. You can just upload directly to Spotify. Instead of 52 cents on the dollar, they're only paying 50 cents on the dollar. But you get, as an artist, you get to keep all that because you're not paying anything to AWOL or Sony Red or to DistroKid. Spotify and SoundCloud. SoundCloud now has a thing, you direct upload. Not only can you direct upload, they will still take it and deliver it, distribute it to other streaming services for you. Major labels, there are offering things like artist services and more like distribution and marketing and plain old like brand management. You got managers acting like labels and investing money in artists' careers to boost things along. Both Spotify and record labels have been buying podcasts. Spotify buy the podcasts because they can upload it on their own content, and it's this step towards, it's the Netflix thing, right? A step towards not only being the distribution platform, but controlling some of the original content. AVL Digital Group, I didn't know who this was, I just read about them. It's a division of Downtown Music Holdings, but you realize one company owns CD Baby, Disc Makers, Merchly, and a bunch of other companies. One thing I've been noticing is like disc makers, because now in these days, all of a sudden they'll print a small batch of CDs for you at a much more competitive price than it used to be. And they've got these package deals with distribution through CD Baby, and I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. Well, no kidding, man. They're all owned by the same company. CD Baby offers a thing called show.co, and it's a marketing platform. We run pre-save campaigns and things like that. Anyway, so you get the idea. It's confusing, and all these things are morphing. Again, I saw this. I didn't know who this guy was until I read the article. But Spotify just created, this is from April 1st, a head of artist and talent relations. Well, why do you do that? Why do you do that and create that position unless you're starting to act like a record label? Right? The future, I think what you're going to see is trends where people, and maybe not everyone, but some level of the food chain, you don't need a distributor. You can just upload directly to Spotify. And if you're in a position to produce and make your own material and own all your own stuff, what a difference that could make. But I think clearly that's the trend. Yeah.
Well, I was listening to the radio today, and there was on Freakonomics on PBS was the interview with Daniel Eakes or Daniel Ikes, whatever his name is. He's the founder of Spotify.
Yeah.
And he was just an offhand comment. He was saying, well, if you want to get better distribution through Spotify, you got to get to know one of the editors of Spotify. What does that mean?
Here's what I think that means, and something we're going to get into, I think, in a little greater detail. It used to be a while ago that it was kind of this new and novel concept. Like, oh my God, the Spotify is all about getting on one of the playlists. Okay, now I think everybody kind of knows that, but the question is still how. How do you get on one of those playlists? And this is where the distributors, the people that I think from people like AWOL or Sony Red, they know these guys. They know who's curating the sound, these different playlists. And one of the things we'll talk about, there are some people that God has smiled upon, and it has happened by random chance. And they've got picked up and put on one of these Spotify playlists. Now there's a service in the last year, but Spotify allows you, if you're already a Spotify customer, you already have an account, you can upload your, as of yet, unreleased song. I could upload a song today to Spotify and tell them I'm going to release it. It's going to have a street date of May 15th. Okay? And they have an opportunity then to take it and submit it to some of the different for playlist consideration. All right? But you're still just this one kind of random track. There's some other ways supposedly to boost that algorithm. But I think that's what they're talking about. There are still gatekeepers, right? It used to be a gatekeeper because they ran the record label, and not just anybody got a contract, right? There's some big fat guy chewing on a cigar. This is what by the way, which one's pink, right? That kind of scenario. Well, the internet has knocked that down, but to an extent. When you talk about somebody at Spotify, there's still these stage of gatekeepers when it comes to putting together these playlists. Okay. And so what do you do? I mean, let's face it, man. Whether you're in a bar band or there's still people where merchandise makes sense. And that's been the big hit, I think, for the local and regional musician is the money used to make off the merch table. If nobody's buying physical product or buying your CD, either because they don't want it because, I can just get that on Spotify, or how many people do you know that have a new car that doesn't even have a CD player in it, right? But one of the ideas is, to foster this relationship with your audience, and there are other ways, other things that you might sell at the merchandise table that help make up for that shortfall, but still play into that same thing. This is one example. I'm not saying it's necessarily a good one, but have you seen these things? It looks like a cassette. This pops out. It's a flash drive. So for anybody that, everybody knows the best stereo you own and the best listening room is where, right? In your car. And so it doesn't have a CD player anymore, but it has either an auxiliary in or a USB port. So there's one idea. You guys know Dave Carpenter? I did some gigs with Dave over the Christmas season, and Dave said, watch this. And he had these things that were like postcards. And, his album's already done and paid for, and he sold a bunch of them, but he decided not to re-up on the CD order. And he had these postcards he got through CD Baby, and he told me they cost 15 cents a piece. And there were downloads. And each one had album art on the front, and it was on the back was a digital download code. And he was right. he would play a set and he would toss in an original song and he would tell everybody at the end of it, if you like that, hey, come on up here. I got a free CD for you. And of course, it wasn't actually a CD. When they walked up, he gives them this thing, and they take a look at it and they understand what it is. No one took it for free. All right? He gave away this thing, is already paid for. This other thing cost him 35 cents. And people are throwing 5s and 10s and the occasional 20 in that tip jar. And they were going, more importantly, maybe, there was this engagement. And he says, watch this. And he was right. A couple of people went right back to their table and downloaded that album right to their phone, right then and there. So the point is, there's some creative ways, perhaps, to start thinking about merchandise, since streaming is obviously taking a chunk out of physical product for most people. Right? I think there's still guys that are playing festivals, whatever. I'm sure the Tedeschi Trucks Band or whatever is still selling, a lot of stuff, but not for the rest of us. All right? So with that idea, that's just the context. And we're going to turn this off, get these guys up here. I'm going to be joined here by my buddies, Joel Trzcinski, who works for a digital marketing company, White Label, and he's hands-on as a project manager. So he's involved in this stuff, and he's got some skin in the game on a daily basis. But you might also know him as a drummer in a band called Bliss Nova. And one of the things that got my attention was some of the creative things they were doing to announce their music and little teaser videos and stuff like that. And then Dean Tartaglia, who you might know from the bands currently Rover, and before that, Secret Space and Silent Lions. He's got a new project that figures into this. He's starting a company called Little Star PR. So we've got some ideas or some things to talk about publicity and how to use a publicist and how that might figure into this. Because there's these couple different, here's some ideas. Well, maybe these work, maybe they don't. It's not one size fits all. But the idea of using coming soon or available now teaser videos, do you go ahead and invest in sponsored ads on social media? How do you play that? We just mentioned this when I was talking to Joel, but the direct playlist consideration. And understand there are more than one kind of playlist. Not only are there Spotify curated playlists, but there are playlists by other folks, tastemakers, right? But there's a whole nother path that you can use to influence this. What's the difference between when someone pre-saves or follows? What happens when you engage someone and get your fans? Well, it's cool if you want to stream my stuff, but follow me. Check the follow box. What does that mean? And what's another idea? What about, and this will be Dean's thing, what might blogs have to offer today in 2019? So with that said, we're going to switch this off. Joel and Dean are going to come up, and we're going to have this little discussion. And same thing applies, man. You got a question or an observation, shout it out. Well, why don't we start? Dean, do you want to explain a little bit about, tell us about Little Star PR and what you do and what you offer for folks.
How's it going, everybody? So I feel like the traditional model of PR for bands is still stuck in the late 90s in a really weird way, where you have new music coming out, and people are releasing singles way more frequently when they did. It's not like you have an album cycle every 2 years. But you still have to pay like $3,000 for a PR campaign, and it just doesn't seem like it's keeping up with the times, or it just seems super inflated. So the idea was pretty simple. I represent a lot of DIY bands and indie bands all over the country, but mostly regionally, who just can't afford that much. So I decided to start offering a fraction of that, and an album campaign for me, as opposed to getting all these write-ups that are going to go on the internet where it's already oversaturated anyways, and you're getting 12 band interviews where, this, you can only ask the same questions 3 times to a band before it just becomes white noise. I like to just offer 3 main articles, and it's 1/5 the price that a publicist offers. And it's been growing really quickly, just the whole idea of PR shifting to that. Because it's not like you're going to buy into getting your song premiered on a website for the first listen and get a lot of listens that way. It's just kind of like building a resume and just getting in with tastemakers, really. You know, the market's totally changed on that recently.
Well, can I ask this? Something you mentioned the other day, like the relevancy of, because within this changing landscape, it used to be this really big deal, perhaps a career maker, to get a write-up and say, Pitchfork.
Right.
Today?
So 10 years ago, if you got a premiere write-up on Pitchfork, you'd probably get about 10,000, 15,000 streams. And I just heard from somebody who's in that world. Their average is now down to 300 streams and they get a premiere. So it's just not worth the money that people were charging for it now. You know, it has to come down at some point, and it has to start becoming more affordable for bands to be able to do that. It's basically just building your resume, because if you've been on Pitchfork or XYZ writer has talked about you, that's still worth something. You're still going to open doors with that, whether it's with booking agencies or getting in with venues or whatever. I mean, it still means something, and there's still some credibility to it. I'm just trying to take on whatever the new shift in the music industry is going to be, as you know, as the middle of it is kind of getting scooped out, and it's a lot of just really large artists who are making a great living, and then everyone else is kind of left to figure it out for themselves. I'm just trying to come up in the middle where I see a vacuum, you know, and try to provide a service that's like really desperately needed.
Yeah. So what we're trying to do is, you know, everybody, the idea is so many people I know that at least on the local, regional level, like, you did this album, you know, I'm just going to toss it up on Spotify and see what happens. Well, I think we probably know what happened, you know, unless you're one of the ones that somehow God smiled upon you. But for the most people, I mean, there's a lot of tracks. You know, the thing about Spotify and any other platform, it's data. It's big data. And you can hover right over there, you know, and you hover over that, and that number will come up, and you can see exactly how many streams any given track has. And I bet there's more under 1,000 than any one category. All right. So what are some ways that you might boost that? And the other thing, and maybe Joel, tell us about this, what you think. And again, there's no right or wrong, but just there seems to be a shift. Albums versus singles and EPs in this oversaturated market. We all know how much material we get inundated with every day. You know, what's your thought? Do you have a thought process on what do you do? Should you release an album, or is it what's the logic behind singles and EPs today?
Yeah, I think a lot of artists are now starting to figure out that the single, like 1 single per month model works really well. We have a buddy of ours who did this like a single a month thing, and then at the end, after putting out a single each month, he was able to put all of that out on an album. So it's like he kind of got to have the best of both worlds in that scenario. The single a month thing gave him a chance to put a lot of effort behind one song, where you were able to get onto potentially Spotify playlists or do with what Dean does, getting single premieres on blogs, versus putting an album out, no one listening to it and being like, well, I'm kind of done now. I blew my load, what do I do now?
And you go away for 18 months
right, exactly.
While you write a new batch of songs and save enough money to record another album.
Yep.
You're gone.
Right, and I think that works really well for certain bands, especially like new bands that are just getting started. This other band I came across from a Spotify playlist, and I became a fan of their music. Recently went and saw them live, and turns out they're like kind of selling out almost every tour. They're not even from the United States. And their whole thing was just putting out singles just to test them. It was like, we're just going to put these singles out, see how people respond, and whether or not we put an album out is kind of left open to what we get out of it. And they kind of blew up from various Spotify playlists and lots of PR. So, you know, I know, Dean, you do like a couple premieres before an album comes out. Yeah. I'm kind of curious, actually, from you, does it seem to be more impactful to drag out an album release cycle, or is it better to like concerted short bursts of like lots of effort?
I actually have a question for you guys. Who here are musicians? Who are artists? That's a good first place to pretty much everybody. Okay, cool. That's good to know. Who's putting stuff out on Spotify, or at least regularly? I don't think there's a right answer. I think you really need to know your base and what you're trying to create, especially on a community-wide level. I don't necessarily just mean locally or like locale, but even if you're part of some kind of internet community, you're trying to break through into some kind of vibe, some kind of aesthetic. I think it'll really matter whether you should be doing albums or singles. Like just Rover, for example, my group, I think people have come to know me as a prolific artist, so it makes a lot of sense for us to be putting out albums. And then we can, something we do specifically is we put singles out after the fact, then we make music videos for them. That's how they used to do it in like the 90s.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's
like
the
a
old
throwback
school
to like,
way.
you know, how it was. But I don't know, I think to your point, like when you put out a single, you get to present art, you get to present an aesthetic, you get to present a new creation for people to wrap themselves up in. And if that's how you want to do it, and you're good at doing that visually and creatively every month, every couple months, then I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think you will see some kind of traction.
Yeah.
I know a lot of bands who aren't like that though, and they try to just put out the same kind of experience once a month, and people get really, really tired out. Yeah.
Yep.
Hey, Casey St. John. I wanted to say, if you want to approach it, with sort of a plan, a goal. I don't think you want to be putting out just, hey, we're going to put out once a month. Here's what you are. You're musicians. We're the creative force here. We are the music makers. We are the dreamers of dreams. We're the ones that create it. What you need to realize is, yeah, these people are doing it this way, but don't follow them, you know, because they did it a certain way. They knew certain people. That's how it goes. Here's the way I look at it is, put yourself down at what your goal is. Sit down with the artists and musicians you're working with. Figure out what your goal is. Do you want to be playing around the area, or do you want to move out? You know, Dean's doing some stuff that's getting him, some exposure out there. Yet then you've got some talent here that's making their money here. Yes, you can make a living in the music industry. No, you're not going to be a rock star because you're not up at 6 a.m. with a trainer working out and all that. But if you put a plan together, and let's say, for example, one of the musicians I've worked with, a Giant Step, I knew this was a while ago, but this is an idea, is I put a 2-year plan of 5 EPs together, okay? So we're going to, over 2 years, release 5 EPs. So we've got a product already together. Because you know what's going to happen is when somebody picks up your product, it moves fast. So be ready. Talk to like Larry, who's an entertainment lawyer. Be ready, because you might not need Larry now, but you might need Larry next Monday, because things really move fast. But with this band, what we did was put a 5-album EP. The goal was to get signed. We had them signed within 3 EPs because we stepped back, put it together, put a game plan. Another band we worked with out in Chicago, OK Go. A lot of people know them. They got signed by Capitol, no A&R rep. Why? Because they strategically put together a plan for the longevity.
Casey, what did touring play in those plans?
I'm glad you asked. Martin Atkins Ministry, he's got a book out there. I'll try and get a digital download for everybody. But he says you plan your 3rd tour. You're not just planning on going to make a tour, you're planning your 3rd tour. First one's to get introduced to the market. Second one is to see feedback. Third one, you actually really know what you're doing. That's as a serious tour. But we're serious musicians. If you want to do this for a living, clock in and clock out like a job, 20 hours a week. You want to do it full time, clock in and clock out 40 hours a week. It is on top of what you're doing now. But you know what? When you get up on that stage and whatever's going wrong, you're a machine, and you can put it out and you can put that product out, and that's what you're trying to do is, what did I say? The superstar. A superstar is that person up on stage. When you're looking around, everybody's looking at that person up on stage, and in their eye, they think they can do that too. That's what your goal is, to try and be that person that makes it so simple that everybody in the room thinks that they can do that.
I want to piggyback on that. Then I'll get to you.
What are your thoughts about paying to get on tour?
Say that again?
What are your thoughts about paying to get on tour, like a smaller tour?
Paying somebody to get on tour? I don't think you should do it. I think you give up your own leverage. And this is kind of what I was going to say. I've been on huge tours. I've played basketball stadiums. I've been on record labels. I know pretty much everyone in the music industry. Don't trend chase and don't give up your future leverage. Like, you need a plan, and you need to really believe in yourself. It's kind of what you're saying, 3 steps ahead. the music industry, like those bigwigs, whatever you want to call them, they're dying for somebody with some kind of originality right now to plan. I mean, you can trend chase, and you can try to be the next whoever. Everybody's trying to be the next Travis Scott or something like that. But they're going to see through it, and eventually, when the next downturn comes, they're going to be looking for whoever isn't running away from the sinking ship. Whoever's going in and has had their own plan from the start is, you know.
Also ask that I'm a rock musician. Where is rock right now? Like, is it like kind of like a dead subject right now?
Oh no, I don't think so. What do you guys think? I mean, I have a specific thing, but I think it's going to be more vital and culturally important than ever in the next 5 or 10 years.
Who else gets the? Who else knows who Bob Lefsetz is? You know, Chuck. Okay, you get the newsletter. He's, you know, that guy. He's pretty opinionated, and he's a pretty dynamic writer, and every once in a while there is something that just is spot on. And he's been a big advocate of a couple things in the last couple years. And it's what I'm leafing through here, man. I've got some of these more recent ones, and I could just pick almost any one of them, some kind of quotes, exactly what we're talking about. He's saying rock is back. You're going to see that hip hop has had its dominance in the marketplace. But one of the reasons hip hop has been so dominant, let me back up. Who's somebody you never hear complaining about streaming? Hip hop artists, because they invented that whole thing about boom, boom with singles and releasing albums when they wanted to and all the time, and a prolific outpouring of product, and keeping in contact with their fans. But that rock is going to come back around. But the most important thing about it all is be true to yourself. And ultimately, it's all about good music. And hopefully, it's all about great music. And what we're talking about that changes, the dynamic that is fluid, is the distribution and how it's going to be packaged. But at the end of the day, good music is going to stand on its own. And let me ask a question. How many of you guys are, if anyone, are hip to a band called Sound Tribe Sector 9? One, all right? Here's my personal epiphany.
It's his band.
Yeah, in the last couple years, and then this will segue into a question for you guys. I've got a nephew who follows these guys all over the country. I mean, he plans vacations and uses his frequent flyer miles to go see STS9. And like anyone, if you talk to a true deadhead, I think the idea wasn't just the music, but the friendships they made. And my nephew goes to these concerts all over the country. They run into this core group of people, and it's this big party, it's this big thing. And STS9, as they're known to their fans, recently celebrated 20 years. You know how they celebrated that? They celebrated 20 years by doing 3 nights at Red Rocks. And here's this band I'd never even heard of. And it just goes to show you, there's just so much out there. We can't all, you used to think you knew it all, but no one person can. I can tell you about bands I'm into you've never heard of, and we can change that dynamic around. So let's go back to this.
That's an interesting thing, because that just shows, if they're playing that level, and most of us haven't even heard of them, that you can find a niche that's still pretty big.
There's a whole undercurrent in the music industry that just never gets talked about. It's a shame. And I think maybe part of it, I don't know where they're from, but part of it really is it's very coastal right now. That's the climate. It's New York or LA. And the whole middle of the country has just kind of been scooped out and set to the wayside because there's not a lot of huge artists coming from here. Because we don't know a lot of the tastemakers that are on the coast. You're talking about tastemakers or gatekeepers at Spotify. They're all in New York or LA. How are we ever going to run into them organically, socially? That's a huge part of it. There's no social clout opportunities for us.
Right.
We need to tap into that whole undercurrent music industry thing and build it back for ourselves. That's going to be our way of doing it.
A lot of those tastemakers go to shows in New York or LA, and they discover bands that way. That's not going to happen here.
Just wait till some band from Dayton, Ohio is going to get huge, and then Dayton, Ohio is going to be the new big city.
That's why
that should be her goal.
I wouldn't get too hung up on chasing that or being limiting to yourself in terms of genre, regardless of if someone thinks rock or dead is not. If that's the music you want to make and that's what you're passionate about doing, and to your point about having a vision and getting up and working hard at it, you're not going to do that if it's something where you're just making it so that you can get on some playlists. You have to really be into what you're making, and if it's rock, you should do it. Who cares?
Let's talk about how to cut through the clatter a little bit. there's so much products. I mean, things are out there, and since we are here talking about streaming, and this concept of how do you get 1 million streams? And I don't know. I printed something out. I've seen this. Even if you're not distributed by CD Baby, they have some great tools and this whole CD Baby DIY program. And I printed this out just the other day, and they update this several times a year. And it's a whole little mini Bible about playlists and how you might make it work on your behalf. What things the algorithms pick up. And using both this combination of the non-curated playlists and the curated playlists. And the reason I'd like to talk about this a little bit, or what our experiences are, because so much of it just seemed like good marketing. Even if it doesn't pay off, this was a good way of building that community, right?
Building a system for yourself, right?
A system and a fan base that you communicate with that are willing to follow you where you go. And let's talk about a couple things. Is that Chloe? Chloe, you guys, Chloe and the Steel Strings, you guys have had some success lately and some nice numbers. Have you broken 100,000 yet? Okay, so the success that you have had so far, to your knowledge, I mean, have you been featured on any playlists, either curated or non-curated?
We have been on a solid number of personal playlists.
Okay.
That have had, I would say, anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 followers. Nothing like a playlist with 100,000 followers, but some decent smaller playlists.
Okay, so you're using the non-curated thing, and plus a growing fan base, all right? And one of the things, we mentioned it earlier, but since it was there, the thing is, if someone follows you on Spotify, that the next time you drop product, it will show up in your own, one of the personalized playlists that they make for you, like your new music weekly. If you follow a band and when they release a new single or a new album, that will show up automatically in some of their personalized playlists. Now, Joel, you've been part of a band that was fortunate. And so tell me about anything you want to share about your playlist experience with Nathan.
Sure, yeah. I have two younger brothers, and the middle brother is a singer-songwriter, and was putting out kind of a little bit of like a folk kind of rock and roll project. His first single that he put out was a cover of a Beatles song, and we just put it on SoundCloud, and then it went over pretty well, and we decided to put out an EP. I think he was very hesitant. And I've worked with songwriters before where they're a little bit like, I'm not sure how to put this out. I'm not a business person. I don't know how this works. I just have some songs I wrote on my guitar. So I am a little more business-minded, and I worked with him in helping get that recorded in the best way. We put a lot of time into it, and it was just an EP. This was 2011. Put it out. Since then, from that point on, we ended up kind of putting together a more full band, put out an album, a bunch of things. No Spotify traction at that time. I didn't even know what Spotify was, to be honest. Band went on a break, just a hiatus. We just needed to focus on other things, and I started a new project. And around that time of starting a new project, I see this thing with Spotify playlists happening, and a friend of ours said that we were on a playlist. I thought it was just a cool thing, didn't think much of it. It turns out that was the playlist that they were initially doing. I read this article from one of the directors at Spotify who had been in charge of that playlist. They put it out as a way to experiment in how playlists could be a new thing moving forward for them, whether it was going to be viable or not. And I think there were a few million followers on that playlist. So he had 2 songs added to it that ended up getting, over time, around 14 million plays. So it was kind of like a winning the lottery situation. But when I listen back to those songs, it kind of makes sense why they would be they're very playlist-friendly types of music. It's very intentional. The type of song it was has a very distinct sound, very distinct target audience in mind. Not that we knew all that going in, but it was very accessible to a lot of people.
Should it be, is it with like fresh coffee or front porch or there, right?
Yeah,
There's
there's
so-
names. Yes, coffee house playlist.
Coffee
and it's
jams.
exactly what you think of with a coffee house.
And there's so many that are just,
Acoustic-y, Ryan Adams type of thing.
there's so many playlists that are just, they rub shoulders. What differentiates one from the other? So if you're ripe for one, you might be ripe for several.
I mean, if you write songs that have that type of accessibility and it's produced well and recorded well, you definitely have a chance to get on one. I think it's a little oversaturated now. At that time, it was a little bit of a sweet spot. Sure. But, I mean, personally, I invested a lot of money into that band over about a 5-year period of time, and I was able to, I think we, in total, and I don't mind saying this now because I didn't write the songs, it's not like I'm bragging, but we made probably about $60,000 or $70,000 just on a few songs. So I think more than like being some type of like strategic digital marketing wizard, I didn't do anything, dude. I think the credibility goes to actually having a vision, writing songs over and over and over until you found one that really hit, putting a lot of time into getting it recorded and produced and mixed and mastered. We put effort into every possible part of that, into creating the artwork. I mean, we didn't shortcut anything, to be honest.
You and I were kind of talking about this before, too,
Yeah.
and I think this is important. How many people listen to Spotify playlists? I think we've kind of found this. You have to be fairly genre specific. There's not like a great outlet for like weirdo noise music playlists or anything like that, because they have a specific brand that they use. Like Spotify's brand reminds me a lot of Target. It's really clean cut. It's like appealing to older millennials, you know?
Yeah,
So
the soccer mom's playlist.
yes, it's very soccer mom, and I just feel like you can't stretch too much. Like it really does have to fit into a box to get into a playlist to some extent.
Yeah.
But I think that's mostly true, and I think that's also important to know. If that's something you're striving for, like Rover, we're going for playlists. Like it's too weird.
You're almost
and we
an
know that.
anti-playlist band.
We're the anti-heroes of Spotify playlists.
Yeah, proud of it. Look
Yeah,
at that.
exactly.
Carry
right.
that, dude.
Well, one thing, Nathan, one thing is, we've shared some conversations, and thanks to Scott Boberg at the Toledo Museum of Art, I've gone down the rabbit hole hard the last couple years with whatever you want to call it, man, minimalist music. There's a sweet spot where this ambient stuff, on one hand, it may just be something that you want to go to sleep with and you don't care what it is. And then there's somebody that takes it just
But dude, if people are playing your music in their sleep, you
All
may
night
have
long.
tapped into the best genre
Cha-ching.
ever.
Yeah,
People-
cha-ching, right?
That's the jackpot
That's
genre.
That's
But
it.
what I've noticed is there are so many. All right, so you take that a step and say, now, but I'm looking for serious music in that genre, the Rodelius, the Harold Buzz, whatever. And when does it cross over? But that search has led me to realize how many playlists are just one step away from each other. And which one of these ambient things, which ones are kind of celestial, and I don't really care what the artist is. Which one's really left of center and is much closer to head music? It takes me back to early Pink Floyd, and there's this whole gradation. But for you, with your PR, with Little Star, and bounce off Chloe's thing there. Non-curated playlists. What they tell me or what they report is that it triggers the algorithm, and it's one way to at least get noticed. And on the curator's radar, it may or may not result in anything for you. But at the same time, following the idea, whether you agree with it or not, tell me if you disagree with it, but the idea that working that thing in and of itself is good little marketing for the band and building that community. Is this someone that Little Star would be on its list to reach out to? These kind of non-curated playlists, the tastemaker playlists?
I've thought about it. We specifically don't deal with metrics, with quantitative results, so I wouldn't personally. But if that's something that you're into enough, and it's a good enough system where you at least see some small result, you can put, kind of like Casey was saying, put 20 hours a week into that, you're gonna get results even if you don't get picked up by a curated playlist. And I think that's the one of the big messages I try to get out to my clients and any artists out here, especially young artists who are trying to figure it out. Like, you need to figure out your system, and it's something that you can put work into, and that pays off in some kind of way long term that you can really start to see adding up. Because you don't want to just try to find the next thing and try to play the lottery and, I mean, get lucky like you did with that stuff. I mean, it's awesome that it worked out, but
I tried a bunch of different ways to repeat that. It's
right.
It didn't happen.
And I know what you're saying.
Spin your wheels.
I'm curious if you looked into the idea of getting picked up by a similar sounding playlist. My gut would tell me, and I don't know if you looked into the data on it all, my gut would tell me that you wouldn't, just because, like, I don't know, Occam's razor, like it's like a lightning strike. It probably won't happen twice that like what you're doing is going to get picked up by the same kind of thing. And there's so many bands. There's just so many.
What I read, and this is one of the areas where I'm more book smart than hands-on, but it does happen. Someone I mentioned, an artist earlier on that was, and it was more of an ambient type thing, was making, and it smiled upon her, and it her stroke of good luck. So how it worked out, then she got picked up on the. Like there'd be, when you reach a certain stage, there would be like Harold Budd stuff, just because the name it came to me. This is Harold Budd, and they'd be like Harold Budd Radio, right?
Well, I think those are all just like if you're an artist, it's not necessarily Spotify makes those.
Right. Okay. Exactly.
Gotcha.
So, but the radio, right, is not just the music of that artist, but music that is very similar to that artist. So not only were they picked up on one or more playlists, but what seemed to have the most legs is they got on a couple different artist radio channels, which is probably a concept more like Pandora, and that's what worked for them. Now, has anybody played with this concept? One of the ideas for the playlist that you can do yourself. I mean, this for somebody that's doing nothing. If there's nothing, if you're not trying, this is something to at least try. And I want to know if anybody's played with this. But the idea would be, I'm just going to go riff with this. You were at this. Tell them where you played last night. This is a cool thing.
Oh, we did this event with a friend of ours who has a kind of a synth pop band in Cincinnati, and they did a themed thing called Synth-Cincinnati. So all the bands on the bill were from Ohio, and they were all synth-based.
Okay. So what about if one of those bands put together a playlist, and because there ought to be a common thread, and you could use the name of the festival or synth band. I don't know, synth bands from Ohio, but something sexier than that. But what you just don't make the playlist, right? You make the playlist. You contact each and every one of those bands and tell them, hey, here's what I've done. I've created this playlist. You're on it. Please tell your fans. And so the idea is this band, their next social media blast out to their peeps is, hey, we're on this playlist. Check it out.
Where were you 2 weeks ago on this idea, Larry? The event's over now.
Yeah, well,
it's a good idea though.
Do you know the Holland House by chance, or like the Summit Shack, some of the DIY venues in town?
Yeah, I've seen.
They already do that organically. I mean, they're putting on shows probably 3-4 times a month, and they have touring bands that come through. And they play these house shows, but they have their own Spotify playlist, and they just organically get not a lot of traction, but a decent amount from what I can tell.
Yeah, if you're not doing anything else. And then the idea, though, taking it further, would be with this kind of lineup, at least you've got bands from all over the state. Yep. Now, what if you played a regional festival, and you could end up having all these different bands on the playlist, at least in theory, that are from different parts of the country, all telling their own fan base about it, getting people to go give it a listen, maybe follow it, and maybe, just maybe, listen long enough till they get to your track, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the theories.
Right.
Has anybody ever played around with that concept or tried one?
There's a lot of community-based playlists, like Promo West is a promotions company in Columbus.
I've seen that one, yeah.
Bands around here have been added to their playlist. And sometimes it's because they're playing in Columbus. Other times, the curator just found them on Facebook because of mutual friends, and they like them. And I think that's what's important. If you're going to do the smaller playlist, the personal playlist, there has to be some kind of semblance of community for it to take off.
Yeah, and I think really the point behind the point you're saying is a collective grouping of people with trying to accomplish something together versus just sort of being an artist on an island who are just throwing their music up and hoping for the best.
Haphazardly gambling on, trying to get on something.
Yeah. So let's say you are that artist though, and you're a new budding band in this trying to get off the island. All right, you're out there on an island by yourself, and I'm going to release a single. Right? Let's just say I'm going to release a single. What do I do? Let's say I've got a street date picked out a month from now. What might I do to give it the best shot I've got?
Well, I mean, from personal experience, I mean, obviously I'm going to prop up Dean here, but that's not just because we're on stage together. Actually, off stage, I've become pals with him over the years. But when we started our project, Bliss Nova, it was really a side project that was not intended to be a full-time or even part-time focused effort. It was just like, let's just put some songs out. And when I talked to Dean about it, I was like, hey, check out these songs we're going to throw up on SoundCloud. And he's like, hey, I think we should meet up and maybe you should consider putting more effort into this. So I met up and you were like,
hey, man, I think you need some help.
Yeah. Clearly, because we had no plan. We were just sort of like, we recorded some songs, we were just going to put them up. And you were like, I think this has some legs and some potential. I think I could actually get this in some prominent areas where I think your listeners or who would like this music will find it. And that kind of made me rethink what we were doing. And because of, I really honestly mean this, but because of his recommendations for actually having like a vision for releasing some stuff, putting some teasers out, putting a couple singles out, getting some blog press, getting on some playlists. Playlists were mainly Indie Shuffle, which is, I even feel like that's dated now, but that was something where it took SoundCloud things and puts it into sort of almost like a shuffle playlist.
I think kind of what both you guys are getting at, if you're like a brand new artist right out the gate, maybe don't put your first song out. I think you need to have a team of people that you show it to and say, is this good?
Totally
or what would you do with it? Or, hey, you're older than me, you have more experience. What do you think about this?
Right, that's pretty much what we did. It was like, hey, listen to these songs. We haven't put them out yet. What
I
do you
think I think you should use your first song or first couple songs as a business card and just start to, or just, like
that's a great
as a handout,
point.
just start to show people like, what does this suck? Maybe it sucks. Maybe I shouldn't put this
Yeah,
out.
and what is it? Where does it fit in? What is there an audience for this?
Because sometimes you don't know as an artist.
Totally.
Like I have a really bad barometer with my own stuff of what other people think of it, but I have enough people around me now that.
All right, let's say we've agreed. You've agreed, and with the consult of others, and you've collaborated with other people, and this is the song. We're ready to put this out. What do I want to do? You mentioned teasers. Talk about teaser videos, the 30-second. I mean, there's coming now, or coming soon, or streaming now, available everywhere.
Well, I think this is really leveraging the space in which most people are using, which is Instagram. And I think it's hard to, if you're putting out a song or you're going to put out a single, like how do you visually represent that in a medium where people are most likely looking for something like that? And that's either Instagram or Facebook. But Instagram allows you to kind of craft a visual aesthetic for what you're going for. And so if you don't have anything visually representing it, it's kind of hard to build any type of Okay, so what are we talking about, though? We talking about a 30-second video? Yeah, I think like a couple of short little visual teasers to represent aesthetically what you're doing with song clips allows people to quickly give a taste where they're not investing a lot of their time into hearing it. They can just sort of passively listen, and if they like it, then maybe they check out the next thing that you put out.
I'm cool, but I'm not that cool. If I want to do that, who's somebody locally I can turn to help me, or I can hire to make that video?
Jake Weber.
Yeah.
Jake Weber.
Yeah, there's a few people.
Marcus McCannis.
Yeah.
Joel.
I've
Brad
done a couple.
Floria.
Joel's done some.
Joel's done some.
Yeah, there's people that do that stuff, and I think it's becoming more common
If
now.
anyone needs help with that out there, like right now,
There's a
and when
network
we're
of
done,
people.
just talk to me. I'll get you the names. I love helping people out.
Yeah, there's
with
really
stuff.
talented visual artists in Toledo.
There's really talented visual
everywhere,
artists
but-
in every city, in every scene that you happen to be in, and the more that you team up on it, again, it's all becoming a collective with this. That's what matters with putting release out. Maybe $50,
$50, $100, maybe.
To create a 30-second clip.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you
I
want,
mean,
like,
if
a
you find
longer
people
thing.
who are more DIY, and especially like these guys are in their early 20s, and this is what they do for a living. They're just scrappy and they're out there doing it. I mean,
they'll probably do a thing with you where it's like, oh, you need some promo shots too, because you really should have a variety of visual.
Yeah, if you want to package
representation.
that stuff, I mean, maybe 50 to 250 at the very most, something like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I would say that, so like something that my sister A and I
Okay, so you go ahead.
Well, kind of just what you're saying too. I think it's more important than anything to get a crew together. You want to work with the same visual artist. Once you found someone you really like to, for example, if they're making a clip for you, you want to work with them again and again and again. That's how you snowball it, and then they're gonna get ingrained in your vision, your aesthetic you're trying to put out there, and that's when the real magic starts to happen. That's been my experience.
You won't have to explain to them every time
Yeah.
what you're doing. They'll eventually, and then they'll help shape it and be thinking ahead of like, hey, I've started to work on this album art for you. What do you think? It's like, dude, you captured this better than I could have ever imagined.
Okay, so you've got a promo pack, you got a nice professional quality photo, you've got your teaser video, and what you're doing is trying to get some traction to alert people that, hey, this single's going to drop in the next 7 days, 14 days. Okay,
this is what I say to my bands I work with. You really only want to ever lead 7 days at the most. I know some people who can, and you just got to trial and error. You got to know your fan base. I know some people who can even tease the day before, and you get more traction that way because that's where their fan base happens to be more. I don't know.
People forget stuff.
Yeah,
man.
the more disposable
overload.
Yeah,
You know? It's got to be a day or two before.
Okay,
but some.
That was so last week.
Yeah.
Well, I'm telling you, what did album cycle used to be, right? You used to get a year out of it. Album cycles are 1 to 4 weeks. And that's not a joke.
Yeah,
that's how it is now.
You're gone. You're out of the public eye.
You got to be able to roll with it. And then you're out of the public eye. You got to be smart about it.
So you do that, and are people familiar with the concept of pre-saves? Spotify will allow you, and DistroKid's got a really great little template that they allow you to use, and so it has a direct link back to allow somebody to pre-save. And the idea is if you get your followers to do that, that all, when you go live, that all drops at once, okay? And depending on the size of your friends and the people that have elected to pre-save, that can cause a bump in the algorithm and may or may not get you noticed, right? But that's one thing about it.
All right, what's pre-save? When the album or the single comes out, then they automatically download it?
Right. If it'll automatically, let's see, man. You got to kind of work your way through it on the screen. But if you're going to drop a new single, and if I find it and I hit pre-save, it'll show up in my feed the day it comes out. I don't have to search for it. It'll come up in one of the playlists, or it'll automatically find its way to me. Chuck?
I was just going to say that pre-save thing, I didn't know what it was about until a band that I play with from Nashville, they were doing a pre-save thing, and their record dropped last week, and now it's number 24 on the Billboard charts. Just crazy, just from pre-saves.
Yeah, so you work some of these concepts together in tandem. One is asking people to pre-save, and the other, again, we mentioned it before, but the concept of encourage them to follow. And because that means things will show up in their feed automatically.
This is making me think that they probably also have like an email list of people that they're bombarding. Because
they have their own base they're already tapping into.
Yeah, because we've kind of used that. It's so crazy because I feel like everything I'm saying is also somewhat dated, but we use the site Noise Trade, which is you put your music up, and in exchange for giving your music away for free, you collect an email address. And
Bandcamp does this too?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's an option if you have a free...
That's a smart thing to do.
Yeah.
Because I think you should use...
We actually use that for targeted marketing on Facebook at one point for Secret Space, and that bump helped us get on a Discover Weekly playlist.
Yeah.
So, there's obviously... I want to go to...
big push
to him
like
next.
that, I think, is important.
Guys, hand up.
So back to what you were saying about CDs having a 1 to 4 week life cycle, with the band Tool being a really, really famous 90s hard rock kind of band, do you think they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot because they don't want to release any of their music on Spotify or any streaming services?
Maybe not them because they're the last ones, so there's this weird mystique to it. Theoretically, yes. I don't know why anybody would hold out by not having the music on Spotify at this point. It seems like a Luddite kind of mindset.
That in itself seems like a PR move.
But since they're the last ones, it seems like a PR move, and since it's Tool and that's kind of their mystique, like just seems like such a Maynard thing to do to not put it on Spotify. It seems to be working for them, but it's a little surprising. It seems like I listen to their stuff on YouTube at this point if I want to find.
Doesn't
them.
that guy make wine?
Yeah, he does.
So maybe he's fine. Yeah, he might be okay.
You triggered something. Well, Rob, we'll get to you. You triggered something. You talked about somewhere you could upload and be available. And when we've talked about using a publicist, so let's circle back to that. And because as part of this little build-up before your music drops, or within this window of time immediately after it drops, but there's a window. You turned me on to a thing called Submit Hub.
Okay.
How's that work?
So that was something we tried, and I even feel like that's oversaturated now. These things that get traction all of a sudden just become like completely oversaturated.
Yeah, you have to hit them right when they start.
Right, and that's what
Submit
we
Hub
did
was
that.
basically submitting for website writers to pick your song up to review. I think the problem with it now is that there's a lot of websites, and you could just get picked up for a bunch of crap ones, and it's not really
There's not a lot of good. Yeah, but what we did is we were very selective initially. We just picked the ones that, because you can pick by genre, and we picked by genre, and it gave us like kind of a small, quick burst of small blogs that we could like say, hey, we're on this now, we're on this now, we're on this now. And it's like $1 or something for doing that. And it's something you can try, but I feel like even now it maybe has lost its sort of allure. But what you do is helping with like a bigger premiere, so like a full write-up.
Yeah, to kind of go back to what we're getting at, when you have the teaser and you're ready to put it out, the whole point of going with a publicist is to get co-opted by someone in the music industry or someone in the writing community to say, hey, this is good. I mean, it's kind of as simple as that, but it really leaves an impact, especially if you're just known locally, you're trying to get out regionally. Hey, this is co-opted by this site. They have this kind of clout to them.
Stuff you work with.
Yeah.
This is a question, because I think it apply to anyone in your position. Obviously, you're not going to take on just any project.
Right.
All right? It's going to be something you like. Are you, I got my own mind because I'm familiar with you a little bit in your music. Are you genre specific?
No, it's just feel if something has heart. I mean, that's what I'll take on. Yeah,
Authenticity?
Authenticity,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
That's what I'll take on.
Rob had a question over here?
No, this whole conversation is just making me think of when the Eagles put out their last double record. Didn't they have some kind of a PR stunt with that? Remember they marketed it through, because they were kind of out of the loop with a lot of younger people by the way. They were like, who are the Eagles almost?
I've never heard of them. I'm just kidding.
It's our big Lebowski moment right here. The Eagles. Yeah, I think they've used that. And, one of the things, and distributed exclusively, retailed exclusively, I think, through certain outlets. And, there's another concept that applies sometimes with streaming services, too, is the concept of windowing. And we're not going to withhold it from other services or other retailers, but the initial window of maybe 14 days or something.
I think Frank Ocean did this with Blonde a couple years ago.
We're going to give somebody
Apple Music.
Yeah, we're going to give somebody exclusive rights on this for a short period of time to try to boost that. All right, where we want to go next with this? Any questions out there? All right, remember the bar's open, folks.
So the way I like to do it is you drop a couple singles before the album comes out. And that's still kind of the traditional way of doing it.
Okay, and those singles would be
On the album, yeah.
Okay.
Or
And we're talking about Spotify here, specifically.
Yeah.
Well, any streaming, it would.
Okay, so we're talking about streaming, we're not talking about
Right.
downloads at this point.
Right.
I mean, is all of your money being made through streaming, or is download an element of this anymore, or is that kind of like?
It's a rapidly declining.
Yeah, personally, none of my money's made from either.
Yeah, I don't think.
I mean,
downloads-
it's from gigs, and one big thing, and maybe we can talk about too. I think is important for young artists. Licensing. I've had my music licensed for TV, and that's where a lot of my successes have come from.
Yeah, and also one distinction: when you do a single premiere where you're, it might not even be Spotify. It might be just a SoundCloud link embed or a YouTube, like a music video or something, as the premiere. But it's also available on Spotify.
Because you keep exclusivity if you go through YouTube.
Right.
YouTube.
So it's like you can only listen to this for this day on this website with the YouTube embed here.
Is your point kind of figuring out where the money's gonna?
I'm just trying to understand the point A to point Z kind of thing, because
I think the
I apologize.
the overriding feeling is, and we'll get right here next. If you put out, you spend all your money and write all the cycle of songs, and you put out an album, and then you go away for a while because maybe you're out on tour, maybe you're not. But chances are you put out an album, and it's going to be a year before you write the next batch of songs and you raise the next batch of money to come back with another album. Today in 2019, in that year, your history, your toast. I mean, you might have your niche. Hopefully you have a niche. I mean, some people have a niche and they'll still have a following because they're cultivating that following out on the road or doing other things. So the thought process is coming back, to use, I guess, like a boxing metaphor. Instead of having the big knockout punch once a year, it's just a bunch of little jabs throughout the year to keep you in the public eye. And the other part of this is you don't have to finance the whole album at once. You can do this single by single, and there's this middle ground of aggregating them together and put out a 4-track EP. I mean, there's another way. And the EP, by doing an EP, you still have something that, if you are gigging live, to sell at the merch table, all right? And so it used to be that this was really the only way, but I think things are going back, degressing to the point where a lot of it, at least in certain genres of music, is more single-based. And in a lot of ways, things are going back to where it was at the turn of the 1900s. How did a musician make money? How did they make a living? They played gigs. Maybe they sold a few piano rolls, right? But the main thing was live performance. So maybe, I don't know, historically, maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. And the superstars of the 60s and the 70s, maybe that was the blip on the radar. That was I don't know.
I don't think you're going to make, most artists I know by a long shot, the biggest percentage don't make any money from streaming or downloads. But what happens is it helps you step up and build something to get picked up for something bigger, like licensing.
So it's the raise your profile is what you...
Yeah.
Yes, and until Spotify changes how much they pay artists, or until the culture changes on how much we value really huge artists that are getting all the plays, I don't think it's really going to change.
Part of the logic, again...
Are you guys doing this all as DIY, or do you have somebody who is helping you to upload these things to Spotify?
I've done both. I've been on a record label that did that, and then I've done myself. And interestingly enough, with the label, that band probably got close to 1 million streams in total, and singles altogether.
Okay.
And we still didn't really see any money from it, because when you work with a record label, like you were saying, I mean, we got such a low royalty percentage.
And another thing to understand is I see contracts come across my desk, and somebody says, there's a small startup label, and I think one of the questions you want to ask is, what's their distribution? How are they going to do this? If somebody's a startup label and they're going to use CD Baby, well, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but you got to realize you could do that yourself if you're so motivated.
If they don't already have contacts and you're working with somebody else, you should really work with someone if they have specific contacts. Yeah. Like you talked about different distributors earlier, and like AWOL was on there. AWOL is a streaming service that's private because they have contacts with people who are already in the industry, and they'll go to bat for you. And that's just something you got to meet somebody at AWOL. Again, it's exclusive.
Well, and the other thing with streaming, when you come back to, I think it used to be the days when the gatekeepers, they liked somebody, thought it had an idea, and we could invest in this person. Let's take a chance. We can groom them a little bit, and we throw a bunch of stuff at the wall. Sometimes something sticks. But when it sticks, it makes so much money that it pays for all the losses. It's like the film industry. Well, now the thought process is, I think more often than not, is changed. If you're the record label, you don't have to take that risk. I can look at data. I can look who's actually got a fan base, because people are following them, either Polestar or seeing their shows and what they're actually doing on the road, and data objectively, how many streams is their music getting? What's their social media stats? So,
They want to get a cut of it.
well, but there's somebody they can pick up and take to the next level, because then they can bring some marketing muscle to it. But the idea is they don't have to go out on the limb and develop that act. They can see who's already got it going on and help take them to the next level. Yeah.
Can you touch on the efficacy of deliberately releasing singles in order to group them into an album once they've been through a PR cycle, and then pushing the album and having a physical release? You can do in merch shows as well. Kind of like the best of both worlds of kind of trying to hit the streaming thing and the blog releases or features, whatever.
Like how to put an album out if it's a collection of singles, essentially. It seems like an album should be a celebration, again, in your community, because they're few and far between in a sense now. And
Dude, I totally agree. A celebration, it's a good reason to have a big party to celebrate an album that you put out and have a bunch of people there see you play and then have your friends open for you.
Bands are just MCs in a sense. We're just trying to throw parties. You know?
It's an excuse to get a lot of people together, have some drinks, and listen to music.
Right.
But I think
it should be your victory lap is kind of what I'm getting at.
Or is it, though, providing, if you understand this, we've already had the press with these songs, but now it's going to give me something to sell at the merchandise table.
That's a part of it. And if you group it together, you're going to get more streams on the initial bump on Spotify when people first start listening to it. Because a lot of times they'll put it on and they'll forget about it, or they'll just listen through and they'll cycle through and it'll repeat and everything like that. That's why like Post Malone put out 27 tracks on his album last year, because they knew that they were going to get more streams just from people forgetting it was on, which is kind of sad. But I mean, they pretty much admitted to that's the reason that they did it. You know, that's why people were putting these. Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Yeah, they've done studies on how quickly you need to get to the hit, to the part on the song that like really delivers the goods, and the longer you take, the more the people are just gonna be like that. Moving on.
Click through rate.
Yeah, you gotta.
I'm not a fan of any of this, by the way. For
no,
the
I know.
record.
I'm not
that's
saying
just
you
where
should
it
do
is.
that,
That's just,
but
yeah,
that's the numbers.
That's just where it is right
that's
now.
just where it's at. Yeah.
Another question real quick. Do you, when you upload to Spotify, do you consider uploading to like iTunes as well for people who do still want to download? And then secondly, in your age bracket, are you at all concerned with downloading at this point, or would you rather just stream and more or less play the music?
I'll go with number 2, then number 1. Just streaming. I just think that's the way that
On-demand society.
That's the way the technology is going towards. And if you go through CD Baby DistroKid, it's gonna put you on iTunes and Spotify. It's gonna load it to all the for you.
There's an option that allows you to do it all.
Yeah.
Yes. You check the boxes. Yeah. You check the boxes if you want to limit it or if you want wide distribution. So, and one of the things, if you're comparing different digital distribution platforms, how far do they reach? And they're all pretty. I mean, the core ones I think they're pretty much the same, but there are a few things that differentiate them. But you're going to go across the globe. Right, and that's another thing to remember that handled correctly, we're all, I think, at least conceptually, I've been, largely thinking about us and shows I might go see and stuff, but it's the whole world is tapped into this. Do you have a question?
You talked briefly about licensing back in my day when I still had my rotary phone. Licensing was like all about personal relationships.
Yeah.
Do you think it still is, or can you expect modern licensing on that show?
Well, my experience is I work with a company up in Detroit, and the reason they found us because the band I was in at the time, we were doing 75 shows a year, 100 shows a year on the road. So we just happened to increase our percentage of getting seen. I do think it just depends on personal relationships to get in the door to work with a licensing agency, and then when they go up to bat for us, they just already have those contacts that they've met over the years, and they pool all together. It's the same way that I started the PR company. I just already happened to have all these website contacts, so it made sense for me to be a publicist. I think it's the same with licensing. They just happen to know all the people in TV.
Well, and we got hit up because of having blog premieres and things like there are people that check that and look for that stuff, and then we got hit up and like, hey, we want to do this licensing with you. We heard your song, and they named the song specifically, and they named the blog it was on. I was like, oh, that was a PR thing.
Are you guys familiar as a whole with what we're talking about, the idea of there's a lot of non-exclusive licensing agencies out there? And if you're not familiar, and of course this is one end of it, there are companies that will take just about anything. I mean, they'll By that I mean they want quality music, but it's across all different genres, and they'll do it on a non-exclusive basis. You can submit to me, and you can submit to other people as well. Okay, and maybe something will come up. And they have these big, I think, computer programs. So they search their database. They can plug in. I need 120 beats per minute in Spanish about the color yellow, and what comes up. All right. Now, of course, the trade-off with one of those is you can get your stuff into their inventory, and for consideration, but you're just there's nobody being an advocate on your behalf. Whereas if you had a personal relationship with somebody in a small shop, that could mean all the difference. But how do you get that? If you don't have that relationship, understand there are these non-exclusive licensing opportunities out there. But the end goal is always going to be to have that relationship. There's all this music that is bombarding all of us all the time. What's the one that is probably going to get through to you? The one your friend gives you, right? Somebody you already trust and you already know you're on the same wavelength. When they say, if Joel tells me, listen to this drummer, you got to check it out, I'm already halfway there. So there's no substitute for that.
You're right. I mean, that's how it works. And again, with our group, the music really left an impression, and that's the reason that they're still up to bat.
But I think the thing, part of what we're trying to talk about, though, is if you don't have that yet, there are still some other ways to try this, and if you're not getting picked up yet on a curated spot list or curated playlist, there are other things. There are the non-curated. There are the tastemaker playlists, kind of things. The fan base. There's other things that you can work in the meantime to try to make these connections and get that little greater visibility.
And if you don't have your own presence, you should leverage someone else's. One thing we did that worked really well, and I'm not saying this will work for any artist, but our songs are very remix friendly. They kind of are, vibey, dance beat type of thing. So we found some artists who do remixes, and we hit them up. They did a remix. It did cost for a few of them did not. But we then were able to leverage their fan base. They have maybe 30 or 40,000 monthly listeners. So it's like, okay, well, they'll do a remix. We'll put it out. And when we upload it, we'll put their name. So on Spotify, you see the name of the song, our name, and then their name next to it. They're tagged on it. When they're tagged on it, that means all their fans see that. And then if they're typical artist that gets put on Spotify playlist because Spotify takes notice of them, now we're on a playlist and we're getting paid for that. We own 100% of that master.
Rover just did that. We had a rapper that we're friends with up in Detroit feature on our track. It's the same kind of thing. It was the best single we put out so far, just because essentially the fan base has doubled from what we're doing. So
it's numbers. It's
about increasing your odds of just meeting the right person that just genuinely likes your stuff.
Yeah, I'm such a huge fan of collaboration in every aspect, from the business side of it to also like the creative side. If you have someone that you trust that can help you with songwriting or recording, producing, someone that's a good visual artist, you need to have quality collaborators all around.
I've got these 15 songs that I want, I'm dying to get out. Not everybody, probably all 15 of them shouldn't be out there. Yeah. You run into that. Somebody trim that down. I remember hearing about Quincy Jones. That was his big thing as being a producer of a record. He demanded two things, probably three besides big money, but the two things were he was going to have the final say on what tracks go on the album and what order. And somebody to be that arbiter of the quality of the product. But Jake, do you have a question?
Yeah, as a legal question, actually. I've seen a lot of artists get burned over time, not only with licensing, but with actually ideas being lifted. Obviously, everything is a copy of a copy of a copy, as Fight Club opens up with. But from a legal standpoint, to protect yourself, a lot of artists haven't done it over time. I think the first time I did it, I was like 15 or 16, going through the Library of Congress, actually filing the work that way. Is the modern, what would you call the Modernization Act? Like, does that cover the legality costs or anything, or is that still the most foolproof way of going if you have an actual case?
I think the Music Modernization Act is really aimed. There's a couple aspects of it about pre-1972 records and allowing producers to get paid their cut. If they're entitled to some of the money from the master, they can get their money direct from Sound Exchange. But the biggest thing is just this licensing hub to make sure that the rights holders and everybody can be connected. It's just about being able to all the connecting points are right there. That's really what that's about. So I don't think the Music Modernization Act is gonna touch that. You know, something I've seen pop up lately, there are a lot of services I see advertised for like $29 or something. We will, and the wording is very specific, we will like protect your copyright. And what they do is almost the equivalent of writing your song and putting it in a stamped envelope and sending it to yourself and not opening it. And the fine print, I went to one of these websites, and then the fine print is, this is not a formal registration with the United States Copyright Office. Depending on the state you're in, this may or may not be admissible as evidence in a court of law. And, you know, it's like, what do we even, you know, most things are done these days, there's going to be some kind of digital footprint. But the fact is that original work, when it's fixed in a tangible medium, is entitled to copyright protection. All right. So when somebody comes to me and says, "I got some music, I want to copyright it," I know what they mean, but technically that's not quite right. They already have copyright protection. What they're talking about is, I want to register the copyright, which is the easiest and best way to prove that. Right? And now it's done largely online. You can do it yourself, or you can code somebody like me if you just don't want to deal with it. I can, as a service I offer to clients. But it brings like an interesting question. It used to be really neat or an easy, and it still is for people. This is their thing. I'm going to put out an album. Well, at the end of an album cycle, at the end of the album when it's complete, there's a nice little. I used to be able to tell people, here's what you do. You know, you register the copyright in all your songs. You can do it as one batch. Right? And you take all these songs, and if you're not a member of a performing rights society, you should be. So let's register this whole batch of songs with BMI or ASCAP or CSAC, wherever you belong. And so if we try to take that logic into a single-based approach, you know, if you really wanted to dot your I's and cross your T's, I guess before I uploaded a single, you might want to register the copyright. But it's not, is it necessary? No, at some point it makes sense. But you do have copyright protection, all right? So you could do it a single at a time, or you could wait until you've aggregated a bunch of them and do them all at once. But that still is the one only really recognized method. Yeah, Joel.
I got a question. So I'm just curious. This is maybe so performance royalties. Yeah. Right. Like if a song hits, the people that played on the song can get some take.
They can now.
They can now, right?
And that is through Sound Exchange.
So Spotify's not paying out any kind of royalties for performance, or is that just built in the copyright?
Well,
it's also built, I mean, to the publishing aspect of it. I mean,
here's we're mixing apples and oranges there. So let me try to break it out. There's it used to be regular radio, all right? When there's a performance, right, for broadcast use of the music, the only person that gets paid is the owner of the copyright in the composition. So one of the things we talked about early on, there are two copyrights. There's a copyright in the composition, and there's a copyright in the sound recording. In the United States, until very recently, the owner of the copyright in the sound recording didn't get anything. A few years ago, they started a company called Sound Exchange. They're anointed by the government to be the one company to have the monopoly to handle this. And what they do is they can collect for digital use of the sound recording. The classic example would be like Sirius XM, like satellite radio or something like that, or digital online broadcast. I'm not sure, I don't believe this applies to streaming on demand services. But anyways, so there's sound exchange. So what they collect is then divvied up like this. I think it's 45% goes to the featured artist, the recording artist. The remainder, most of the remainder goes to the owner of the sound recording, which is probably going, in most situations, is a record label, all right? And it's for digital use of that particular copyright of the sound recording. Then, right, there's like a small leftover amount, and it's only like 5 or 10%, goes into a fund to pay, I think it's got to be a union member, I think, and it goes into this fund to pay session players.
So it exists.
It does, and that is, my knowledge, is the that's the only way it works. But yeah, and so there are some people that have, I read some guys that have, played on some evergreen hits. They had, it can add up. It can add up.
Pistol Allen, right? The drummer, he played on all the great
The Motown cat, right?
Motown hits,
Yeah.
and he saved every receipt from every session that he ever played. He kept them in this beat the hell, suitcase thing. Couldn't tell if it was a briefcase or a suitcase or whatever. It was beat the hell. And then the performance royalty thing came up, and he just walked into CBS Records, the president's office, and dumped the thing over and just said, "Pay me." And he was like an instant millionaire.
That's something that most artists are so bad at keeping track of.
Right.
And I know managers whose half their whole job is just tracking down any kind of publishing royalty that the artist did a bad job of keeping track of and getting them paid.
But yes, so just remember though that the performing rights organizations, BMI, ASCAP, and CSAC, it's really for broadcast use of the music. Although they do track live performances now as well. So even if somebody like a major artist is going across the country, Bob Weir, and he's covering a Dylan song, that's all right, would make fit. If he's covering a Dylan song and going through and selling out all these arenas, that the live performance, they started to track live venues as well.
Because they encouraged everybody to record their shows anyways, right?
Well, it's not for that though. But yeah, that's part of it maybe, but it's not what it's calculated. It's because the venues are the ones that are supposed to have the license for BMI, ASCAP, CSAC, not the musicians. So it's because they're a venue, just like any other bar or music club or theater.
Right on.
Jake, and then we're gonna.
One last question, legal-wise, touching on that. So a lot of bars in every city, this one in particular, Toledo, about 3-4 years ago, ran into a lot of issues with putting overhead music on.
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of idea what the numbers are like? Because these bars are paying essentially what's like an entertainment license. No different if they show a UFC pay-per-view, something on their TVs, they pay ASCAP or BMI, and what was the other one?
CSAC.
For playing overhead music as an entertainment. So do you have any kind of numbers what that payout is like to the artist? Is it?
Well, it's not going to go to you.
Well, right.
I mean, that's the reality. That's what sucks about it. It goes. I think that money it goes to the bigger artists, and so why at this level, like, you got to get paid, and I understand the concept behind it. I can see both sides. Personally, I think a better approach might be, I think in the UK, they have a pub level exception. If the seating capacity is below so much, we're not going to bother with it. We're not going to chase those guys down. We'll let the corner bar go. We're going to focus on places like the Valentine, the theater level things. Because, because that's all a big thing of making the local scene happen. But none of these local cats are going to share in that revenue. But the thing that most perplexes me is when you hear venues complain about it. And like, what? You mean? Dude, if you're going into the restaurant business and you've got all this, you didn't know of all the things, all these health inspections and everything else, you didn't know this? That's inexcusable in my book. And I was part of a conversation. Somebody was part of the downtown Toledo, I forget the exact, there's so many different sub organizations, and tried to get together a group of downtown bar owners to say, look, maybe we can kind of license this collectively. We can go to them as a group and negotiate a rate or the payment structure, and because it's based on the capacity and stuff. And there's a place not too far away, man. And I know they have live music 3 nights a week, and their attitude was, no, absolutely not.
Wait, who said no?
No, well, the venue. We'll either have to up our cover charge. I mean, it's like $1,500 a year. Meg, if you're $1,500 a year from going out of business, we got another problem. But that is part of the game if you're going to have live music. And talk to somebody like at John Schaefer at the Village Idiot. He's a live, dedicated 7 nights a week music venue, and he knows it, and he's carries the proper stuff. So you can talk about the pros and cons, right or wrong, but I don't think anybody going into the venue business or the restaurant, bar place should be caught by surprise. And so I think that's really like at 6. Is there something else any of you guys want to wrap up with?
I just had an anecdote about copyright.
Do it.
One of my band's tracks that we're being pitched for licensing right now is our cover of Seven Nation Army by the White Stripes, like the biggest rock song of all time. And the company's in Detroit, so anybody up there is like 2 degrees of separation from Jack White and his people. So we purposely didn't do copyright for the song because we knew that if we did and his team didn't like it, they would just say no. Or if they find it out and they want to sue us, we'll just get press from it. So we did that on purpose, just for the reason that we're pitching it in the hopes that something bad goes with it, we get some press off the story, Yeah,
you can turn a bad.
You can spin it into anything, man. You really can.
Any press is good press.
I don't know. Herb might disagree.
Well, we're still talking about him. I know the story. Yeah. All right, Joel.
I think the only other thing, and I'm really seeing this trend lately become a thing that works really well, is we've touched on it a little bit, but collaboration. And we kind of had a stroke of a couple things of good luck where we have sent our music out to bands that we admire or songwriters that we admire, producers. And you'd be surprised. You can get some responses from people, and it doesn't always lead to necessarily a relationship, but we've definitely had a few that have panned out really nicely. And one is honestly just like a behind-the-scenes thing where a pretty prolific songwriter has kind of taken us under his wing as sort of a mentor. And we, a couple of years ago, were trying to figure out what we were going to do after our first EP. And we had a bunch of songs, and we were going to go in and track them. And I was like, what if we just sent them out to other people in the hopes that maybe they'll listen? People that we admire, we'd like to work with. And we got this dude who was in this band called Mute Math, which is one of my favorite bands growing up. And we kind of hit it off with him, and then we ended up meeting up with him, and it was kind of a thing that led to a very a relationship that I never expected it to kind of be. I envisioned it being one thing, and it kind of turned into a thing where we sent him all these demos, and he kind of shredded them apart initially, and it was like, well, I guess we're not going to record those songs that we were going to record. Let's go back to the drawing board. And we did that, and we kept sending him songs, and we realized that as we did that, for a period of a year or so, our songwriting just got incredibly better and tighter, and the songs made more sense, and there was a clear vision, and we kind of broke through this songwriting barrier that I think we're struggling with. And so I would encourage everyone who's writing music to look for people who can kind of help you with being just sort of a objective listener who will give you critiques and feedback. Even if it hurts your feelings, it's going to make you a better songwriter. I think that really helped us a lot. And now we actually just finished recording our album, and I don't think we would have ever got to that point without that type of collaboration and feedback. And even with Dean and with other people creatively that we've worked with, they in each area of our music have helped sort of shape whether it's our visual aesthetic, our songwriting. It's not something that you want to try to do alone, is my point. You need to find people who you can really have a healthy creative collaboration with. And even from a business standpoint, if you aren't the manager in your band, you better find someone who can help you do that, or someone in the band really needs to take the role of manager and help you plan each release, each thing that you're trying to do, and really hone in on your vision. And so that's sort of my 2 cents to add.
Okay, thanks, Joel. Thanks, Dean. thanks to you guys for hanging out and participating. And we're, if you get together some like-minded people, one thing we picked up on right away is we could nerd out on this stuff for a couple hours just by ourselves. So it's good to share it with somebody and to the ideas in the community and realizing that it's not one size fits all for everybody and that it's okay to be confused because this thing is confusing. And so with that, Jordan's going to close this out with a few comments about the grant program at the Arts Commission. And then you don't have to go anywhere right away. We're going to hang out at the bar. Let's talk and continue some of these ideas.
Thanks, Larry and Dean and Joel. We really appreciate all of your insight, and I think it was really informative and interesting, and I hope that we can continue this conversation. I just want to share briefly about some opportunities that we have at the Arts Commission for local artists, which includes musicians and performing artists. First, I want to talk about the Accelerator Grant Program, which is offered 5 times a year, and the first deadline for 2019 is May 28th. I believe it's the Tuesday after Memorial Day. We're about to post all of this information next week on our website and on social media, and it will also be in our newsletter. So if you haven't signed up for our e-newsletter, there's a sign-up sheet at the table on your way out. My business card is also there, so if you'd like to get in touch with me, please email and be in touch so that we can talk more about these opportunities. But the Accelerator Grant is up to $1,500, and it's for equipment and supplies and professional development. And just briefly, Joel and Bliss Nova received one this past year. Do you want to tell everyone what you used the award for?
Yeah, that's something we were looking to do a music video for, and we hadn't at that time really done anything that we felt from a music video standpoint represented us aesthetically like we wanted to, and so we needed a little financial support to get it shot the way we wanted and edited, and we filled out the grant thing because I actually heard about it from Larry's first conversation that you did on this topic, and then I met some people at the Arts Commission, found out that they did grants, and I thought that was a pretty amazing thing. Their support for the local community, and especially for musicians and artists, goes a long way. Something I guess I just didn't realize how supportive they were. And so we just gave it a shot, submitted our stuff, and then we ended up getting funding for that, and we were able to put out that music video. It really definitely helped us establish and build on the presence that we had already had created, so it was very helpful for us.
That's great, yeah. So there's a lot of things that you could apply that money towards. People buy equipment, guitars, all kinds of things. The concept is basically to help your career go to the next level. What do you need? What is the thing that would just bump you up a little bit? So the Accelerator Grant, it's 5 times a year. We'd love to see applications from people with interesting projects locally who just need that little extra push. Another category is called the Merit Awards, and that's an annual award. That goes to there's 4 awards. The top one is $2,500. There are $2,000 awards and then a $500 award. And those are kind of no strings attached. It's just an award that we want to acknowledge the people in our community and the artists in our community who are just exemplifying the level of creativity that we would like to acknowledge and award. And then the third aspect of artist services is something called creative capacity. And in this program, it's not a monetary award, but it is time and advice. So basically, the people who come through that program have a goal for their creative career, and they just need to be connected with people at the Arts Commission, but also our network. So they could connect with people in the community who are doing the thing that they're interested in, who could kind of serve as a mentor for them. So it's not a financial award, but it does have a lot of benefits to it. And so that could be a place where you're seeking advice. All of those are available on our website, and all of those, if you have questions about them, please feel free to come see me or send me an email about that. But I really appreciate your time here and all the questions, and I really appreciate the time of our panelists and Larry for bringing this opportunity to us. And I hope you hang out at the bar and continue to chat with your friends and make some new friends. And thanks for coming out.
I'm a local, is where I was born and raised, yes. Well, I'm a local, where I spend my dying tempting.